Good morning, students. Today we have to take the topic getting started with the kernel, obtaining kernel source. This particular topic of getting started with kernel, obtaining kernel source, installing the kernel source using patches, and the kernel source tree. We'll cover up the things in detail in the forthcoming slides. The very first thing is obtaining the kernel source. The Linux which you might have worked with, it is available in various distributions such as Ubuntu, CentOS, Fedora, and most of these distributions are very much available without any problem, and you can get them installed on your system by giving a separate partition on your laptop or desktop. You don't need to obtain the kernel as such, as these are the part of operating system, and if you are installing operating system, then they are very much available with the operating system itself. But if you need some further installation, in that case, you can take the help of yum, that is Yellow Dog Updater. That is a specific open source command line and GUI based utility that can be considered for updation of your kernel. And at the same time, you can also use advanced package tool get command, which is again used for the updation of kernel. But there are some situations where you specifically need to install kernel on your system, and following are the three particular situations where you can install Linux kernel rather than operating system. Number one is to enable experimental feature that are not part of default kernels. If you are installing the default kernel, there are some experimental part which are not available by default. In that case, you need to install the Linux kernel on your system. The second is to enable support for a new hardware that is not currently supported by the default kernel. As you are already aware, the default specific source code associated uh, with the kernel can be executed on the particular system, and we can generate the particular executable or binary file for the specific hardware. In that case, if a new hardware is available, then in that case you cannot install operating system which are already available specifically used for the specific target machines. In that case, you have to deploy the particular kernel for the specific target which is newly available. And third is to debug the kernel. So these are the particular situations where you need to install kernel rather than operating system. Now the thing is, if you need to install kernel, not the operating system on your machine, where from you can get the source code. The link is www.kernel.org. There are various distributions available for the specific kernel in the form of zip files. They can be either gzip or bzip2. These are the particular compressed format which we have already discussed in detail, and how we can get the uncompressed format that we have already taken up in the first or second unit. bzip2 is the default and preferred format, and as it is generally compressed, build bit better than gzip. The Linux tarball bzip2 format is named Linux x.y.z tar.bz2. This is a particular file in the form of tarball which we have to download from the specific link or site. To download, you can put the download button, click, and you can get the downloading of the kernel. Alternatively, you can use commands also to download the specific version. The website available recently is given in this format, and the particular uh, patches or specific kernel list is already available over there, and you can get it downloaded from the kernel archives. The command for downloading a particular version of kernel is as given. the command is wget. After that, you have to specify the entire link with the particular syntax as you are given in the blue color. Now, after downloading the particular GZ ball, you need to decompress it and place it in the specific directory. Following are the steps which you can follow further. Number one, move the downloaded tarball to a proper directory. Untar the tarball and uncompress the tarball of kernel. For that, as you are already aware, we have used mkdir command for making directory. Suppose if I want to place my tarball in Linux directory, in that case I can give the command mkdir and /Linux. The tilde sign is specifically given for hidden path which is not available over here, but you can take up as per your specific system. Now move the source tarball to the specific directory and further change the directory to the particular directory where you have moved the particular tarball. You have to uncompress the tarball. For that, the command is tar. The XVJF are the options associated with uncompressing, and the name of tarball is specified after that. The entire command is tar xvzf. After that, you have to specify the name of tarball. It can be either bz2 or gz. Now, after decompressing it, if you are looking at the directory listing, it will comprise of a particular directory where entire tarball will be uncompressed. As Linux 2.6.17.8.tar.gz will be uncompressed in the Linux 2.6.17.8 directory under the Linux directory which you have currently created. As we have already downloaded the particular tarball and uncompressed it, further you have to follow the given step for installing the kernel source. The first step is to configure the kernel with the appropriate options. The kernel can be compiled. Both tasks are done through standard make utility. After configuring the kernel, the second step is building or compiling the kernel. For creating the kernel configuration, the kernel configuration is available in .config file in the top directory of the kernel source tree. If you just expand the kernel source code, there will be no .config file, so you need to be created it. It is need to be created. It can be created from scratch using default configuration provided by the kernel or taken from the distribution kernel release. If we are taking the configuration from scratch, the following is the command. We have to change our directory to the particular Linux distribution as cd linux.4.10.10. After that, we have to give the command for configuration, that is make config. The make config command will step through every configuration option and ask if you wish to enable this option or not. The following multiple options will be there: Y, M and N. Y is directly into the kernel, build directly into the kernel, N leave entirely out of the kernel, and M is build them as module to be loaded if needed. The following are the options which you can specify after giving the make command. Kernel contains almost 3000 different configuration options, so being asked for every individual one will take very long time, and it is better to take the pre-built configuration or base configuration in case if you want to go. For default configuration, the following command can be given, that is make def config. In that case, default option will be chosen, and if you are novice user, then better to go for the default configuration rather than specifying each and every option associated with the 3000 or more options for configuration. After that, you will get the .config file creation, and it will be available within the kernel directory. Now, kernel after configuration of kernel, the next step will be considered in the next slide. After getting the default configuration, we may need to modify the configuration. For that, three different interactive kernel configuration tools are available. Number one is terminal based one called menu config. Number two, a GTK plus based graphical one with a gconfig, and third one is Qt based graphical one called xconfig. The first option we are discussing, that is console configuration method. The menu config way for configuring a kernel is a console based program that offers a way to move around the kernel configuration. That means all the default setting which you have already taken up after getting the source code will be available for change. The command is make menu config. Get the display of default configuration option in this way as you are looking at the screen. After selecting the particular option, you can get it modified, and such type of display screen will be available for modification of default configuration with various options that you can check out. After that, the second is graphical configuration method, and the method for implementation will be followed with the command make gconfig. The make gconfig command will give you the following outcome. Alternatively, you can give make xconfig command also. The outcome of make gconfig or xconfig will be displayed as given, where graphical user interface outcome is available for modification of various configuration options which we have already specified in the default mode. You can check out the particular display. The second major step is building or compiling kernel. That will be followed after the setting the configuration of kernel. For that, you have to give the following command. Number one, make dependency, and for that the command is make dep. The make dep command will provide you the header file creation and link dependencies which are required for creation of Linux kernel image. After issuing this command, you might have to wait for 15 to 20 minutes for dependency creation. After that, you have to give make vz image, and that will create the image of Linux kernel which is needed to be installed further. The third step for building and compiling the kernel is make the modules. Modules are part of kernel that are loaded on fly as they are needed. For that, the command can be given as make modules. An individual file that will be created after this command is having .o extension. And this is the final step for creation of the kernel image. And if you do not have any warning or error, in that case, your image will be successfully created. And the further step will be the installation of kernel image. In the previously discussed steps, you have just created the kernel image and it is yet to be installed. In the installation of kernel, there are two ways to install the kernel. Number one, using distribution installation script. In that case, you are going to take the following steps. Number one, to compile the module, the command is make module underscore install. This is the step which you have to carry out after the successful compilation of the module. This will install all the modules that you have built and place them in proper location in the file system and new kernel to properly find. Modules are placed in lib modules kernel version directory where kernel version is kernel version of new kernel that you have just built. After that, second step is to install the new kernel. The command is make install. The make install command will create the following files. Number one, boot directory. After that, the VM line is 4.10.10 as per the kernel availability, the actual kernel. The system.map 4.10.10, the symbols exported by the kernel, and initrd.img, that is the initrd image in temporary root file system used during boot process. And last one is kernel config 4.10.10, the kernel configuration file. The command make install will also update the grub.cfg file by default. So we need not to manually edit the grub.cfg file. That is very much required during the booting process, as we have already discussed the particular grub file in the first unit. As as we have already seen the automatic installation in the previous slide, if you are installing Linux kernel manually or by hand, in that case the outcome will be similar one as in the previous case. The only thing is that all things are to be applied by the user. For doing the thing manually, the first command is make module underscore install. That will install the modules that you have built, but it will not place them in the proper location. In the previous slide, we have seen particular directories where the setup file will be placed automatically. These are required to be placed by the user in the case of manual or by hand installation. After that, you have to copy the kernel to the boot directory. For that command is cp. For that command is cp and with the -v option in the directory path you have to specify. For 32-bit and 64-bit, both are somewhat different. After that, you have to copy the system.map file and create the symbolic link. For that command is as cp and ln command with a particular listing. And following are the things which you have to create on your own in the manual installation, as we have seen in the previous slide. The modification of bootloader, that is Grand Unified Bootloader and Linux Loader, that is the next step we have to consider for the kernel installation. Modification of grub file can be considered with the following steps. We have already discussed the grub file, that is Grand Unified Bootloader, in Unit 1 and entries associated with it. The configuration file is available, and info grub is the particular command that used to provide the grub pages, and that can be modified uh, by the user for configuration changes. The image associated information is already available over there, and if any changes are there, one can modify the grub file. Modification of Lilo file can also be considered. For that, image example is given on the left side of slide. This is the directory where Lilo file is placed. We have to uh, improve our kernel time to time by using patches which are available on the particular site. Many a time updation of the software is needed or kernel is needed. For that, again we can look for the particular URL from where we have downloaded the kernel. This is the Linux kernel archive from where you can download the patch files. After downloading the patch, you have to apply the patch using following command. bzip2-dv patch is the name of patch file, and after that, patch command is the command which is required for implementing the particular patch in the Linux kernel. As we have already seen that configuration can be modified with the help of many config and gconfig or xconfig command in the previous slide. But if you have already used these commands for creation of Linux image, in that case, further modification cannot be considered with the particular old command. Rather, you have to use make old config and make silent old config option for modification in the configuration. And the command can be used for the particular purpose. Finally, after creation of Linux image and its installation, the kernel source tree is created, which is showing the directory which are associated with the kernel after compilation, and the top level source tree directory is user src and Linux, and subdirectory associated are depicted in the particular picture. The details associated with the kernel source tree directory are mentioned over here. Uh, the directory and description is mentioned. Most of the things we have already gone through in the previous units. Uh, the same can be considered as repetition over here. And finally, this topic end up. Thank you. Thank you for your uh, listening and viewing the particular slide. And if you do have any query, you can revert back me on the WhatsApp number. Thanks. Thanks a lot.